Now I know what you're all thinking, did I go out this month and scoop up as much PlayStation 2 shovelware as I could get my hands on? Or did I stick to my guns and only buy important games? Games that I wanted into the collection, needed into the collection? Well, if you want to find out, you just wait until after these. Now before I start with the pickups, if you're new to the channel or you haven't seen my pickups before, I like to do them in this order. I start with the most current games and then work my way back to that juicy retro at the end. And this time I'm also going to drop in a shout out to people who've inspired me to pick up the games that I've picked up this month. And let's get this ball rolling with the first game, and that is Lost Judgement on the PlayStation 5. Now Lost Judgement was an important game for me to pick up because last November I played through Yakuza 0 right through 5 back to back and all for the first time, and hand on heart, without a shadow of a doubt, it became one of my favourite video game series of all time. Now I'm well aware that Lost Judgement doesn't follow quite the same formula as the previous Yakuza games, and as of yet I haven't played the first Judgement game, but I'm sure I'm going to absolutely love it. And the channel I would like to dedicate this particular pickup to is Pete Fighter 2, because it was good old Pete that encouraged me to go down the Yakuza road in the first place. So Lost Judgement on the PlayStation 5 dedicated to Pete Fighter 2 is in the collection forever. Now that was the only PlayStation 5 game that I picked up this month, so let's move away from the PlayStation 5 onto a completely different system, not even a Sony system, because it's going to be the Nintendo Switch. And why the Nintendo Switch? Because I say it time after time, this is a machine that anyone, especially a RPG fan or a JRPG fan especially, should have in their collection. But the first game that I picked up for the Nintendo Switch is Bravely Default 2. Now I can't really talk too much about Bravely Default 2 because I haven't played the game yet. It's most definitely very high up there on the games that I want to get to, and the reason that I picked it up is all down to the person that I'm going to dedicate this pickup to, and that is Digital Diamond 1928. Now if you've recently seen my review on Final Fantasy 16, you know that I wasn't too pleased with it. And off the back of that particular video, myself and Digital Diamond had a wonderful debate about the state of Final Fantasy 16. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail about the discussion that I had with Digital Diamond on the Final Fantasy 16 franchise, but probably the best thing that came from that discussion was Digital Diamond pointing me in the direction of Bravely Default 2. So Bravely Default 2, a classic JRPG, is coming into the collection where it will stay forever. Next up is staying with the Switch, is a game that's coming into the collection but is already in the collection in multiple different formats, and that game is Final Fantasy X. Now the reason that I've picked up Final Fantasy X again was quite simply because this is a Switch port and I can play it portably. Sure, we all like to sit back on the couch, relax and play on the big screen, but every now and again we do have to leave the house, and when you do, well, this Switch has got you covered. And when you've got the chance to play a classic Final Fantasy game, you know, Square, you want to pay attention to this because this is how a Final Fantasy game should play, and you can play it out and about. Well, it was a no-brainer for me to pick it up, and the channel that I'm going to dedicate this particular pickup to is none other than Sir Richard Pitchard. Now I will have to put out a parental advisory here if you haven't came across Sir Richard's channel yet, because it's not one for the weak of heart. Sir Richard is of course an extremely funny content creator, but let me warn you, he doesn't pull his punches, especially when it comes to his comedy. But like me, he believes that Final Fantasy X was probably the last great Final Fantasy game. And being such, I had to get Final Fantasy X back into the collection for, what, the fourth time? But to be able to play it on the go, well, it was an absolute no-brainer. So Final Fantasy X HD Remaster for the Switch coming into the collection, and yes, I've already played through this. Now staying with the Switch, but not a game, no software for this pickup, this is a hardware pickup, and the hardware pickup for the Switch that I've purchased is the N30 Pro 8-bit dual Bluetooth controller. Now I very rarely need an excuse to pick up a new piece of hardware, especially a controller, and a Bluetooth controller for the Switch that emulates classic gaming using a controller that's designed to emulate that particular time period, which allows me to play the Nintendo Online classic games that you get if you subscribe to that package, was an absolute must for me to pick up. And the person I'm going to dedicate this pickup to is Tom, aka Sega Head, who like me will pick up a joypad at the drop of a hat. So that's the N30 930 Pro Bluetooth controller from 8-bit Do for the Nintendo Switch, so you can play those classic games with a classic feeling controller. Into the collection, and yes, it's already been used. Now moving away from Nintendo and back onto Sony, I did pick up one game for the PlayStation 4, and that game is God of War, and in this lovely steelbook as well. Now, God of War is a game that I've tried to play a couple of times and never really got on with it. Now, before you start spamming hate down in the comments, it's not that I think the game's a bad game, it's just one that I haven't been in the mood to play. Well, that's what I feel anyway. It has all the elements that I like in a game, so why haven't I got on with it yet? Well, your guess is as good as mine. But this, however, is the first time that I've had it physically into the collection, and I'm going to give it another go. And of course, there was only one person that I could dedicate God of War on the PlayStation 4 to, and that is the fantastic Scott from Retro Rivals, because without him to push this game, I probably might have skipped past it a few times. But God of War for the PlayStation 4 coming into the collection, and I promise, Scott, I will get it played soon. Now, as I said, I only picked up that one game for the PlayStation 4, so it's time to move down a generation and onto the PlayStation 3. And the first game that I picked up for the PlayStation 3 this month was Shadow of the Damned. Now, Shadows of the Damned is a game that I haven't played before, not at all. I have seen plenty of gameplay footage, and mainly due to the person that I'm going to dedicate this pickup to. And that person is the almighty Mick over at Heaps of Games. Now, if you've never encountered Heaps of Games, then that's a channel you definitely must check out. He's an Irish gamer and collector who likes to stream every second Friday, and he's not very good at games, so you'll have a great laugh with us in the chat while he plays games badly. But all joking aside, his content's absolutely fantastic. He does some wonderful reviews, not just on software but also hardware, and you won't find a person more passionate about video games than Heaps of Games, so definitely check him out, because he guided me down the path to picking up Shadows of the Damned and whipping out my boner. So that's Shadows of the Damned for the PlayStation 3 coming into the collection, where it will stay forever. Next up, and staying with the PlayStation 3, is a game that I already have in the collection, but when I saw this particular variant of it, I had to pick it up. And that's Deus Ex Human Revolution, the Augmented Edition. Now, Deus Ex Human Revolution is a game that I've played many times in the past. It's a game that I absolutely adore, so when I saw this out in the wild and it was cheap as chips, let me tell you, there was no way I was walking away from the store without this Augmented Edition. On the whole, I don't tend to be drawn in with collector's editions or special editions because they take up a whole lot of space that I don't personally have. But this particular collector's edition is nice and streamlined, it won't take up too much space, and it's a game that's absolutely fantastic. And the channel that I'm going to dedicate this pickup to is 3 Drinks In. Now, if you haven't come across 3 Drinks In before, they're a group of friends who play video games, usually really bad video games, but sometimes excellent ones too. And by excellent, I simply mean games like Deus Ex on the PlayStation 2. Where you'll fall in love with their channel is, though, they just act like they would act as if they're teenagers. They get slowly drunk throughout their performances and let the banter flow at that lowbrow level for the majority of their video. I absolutely love those guys, and it's about time that I gave them a bit of a mention, in no better way than to give them a dedication while I've picked up a game that I enjoy watching them play. So that's Deus Ex Human Revolution, the Augmented Edition, coming into the collection, and it's going to be there forever. So moving away from the PlayStation 3 and onto a completely different system, but staying with Sony, we're moving on to a handheld here, and it's the PlayStation Portable, the Sony PSP, and the first pickup is this here. The limited edition Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII PlayStation Portable. Now, I don't need a reason to have picked up a limited edition Final Fantasy PSP, because anyone out there that knows me knows that I absolutely love the Final Fantasy franchise, even if Square are trying to butcher it with the likes of Final Fantasy XVI. But when a classic limited edition piece of hardware like this comes my way, there's no way I'm not going to pick it up. Now, for the person that I'm going to dedicate for this pickup, well, this is a no-brainer, because it was my good old friend the dealer.
Over here, stranger.
Well, it was him that pointed me in the direction of this. And of course, if you want to get to know the dealer better, you can catch him over at your Uncle Da YouTube. But again, as with Sir Richard Pitchard, I will give you fair warning that your Uncle Da can be a little bit close to the knuckle. But nonetheless, he pointed me in the direction of this wonderful limited edition PSP, a console that I've been looking for about maybe 2.5 years now, and it's finally into the collection. And not only is it a PSP, it's a Final Fantasy limited edition edition PSP, which might even be a European limited edition. I don't know. If you know, let me know in the comments, because that's what the comments are for. So the PSP finally into the collection, and it will be getting played a lot soon. Now of course I couldn't pick up a PSP for the first time without adding to my very feeble PSP collection. So the first game that I picked up to go along with it was an absolute no-brainer, because of course it's Crisis Core. Now of course with Crisis Core I've had the privilege of playing the HD remake that we've all just experienced in the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 or Nintendo Switch, so it's not a new game to me. It's a game that I haven't played on the original software, original hardware, but it was definitely a game on my list to pick up and play anyway. And Crisis Core gets some fantastic love out there in the Final Fantasy community, so it was a must-have game. And one person who absolutely sings the praises of Crisis Core on the PSP is the person that I'm going to dedicate this pick up to, and that is the wonderful Chicken Fillets, a fellow Scottish YouTuber who is absolutely delightfully fanatic about JRPGs. So he's Scottish, he loves JRPGs, what's not to love about him? He's just like me. But that's Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core for the PSP coming into the collection, and yes, another one that will be getting played really soon. Next up, and still with the PSP, is another game that I do have in the collection already, but this time for the PSP. We do like to double dip now and again, but you'll see why I have with this one, because it's Final Fantasy IV, the complete collection. And again, for full transparency, I will state again that if anything's got the Final Fantasy logo on it, then I'm going to pick it up. I don't really need an excuse. When I came across this out in the wild, however, it was such a lovely example, totally complete in box. I'm not going to say mint, but it's in really good condition for its age. There was no way I was not going to pick it up. It also gives me another excuse to put the PSP through its paces. And of course, it gives me yet another Final Fantasy game that I can take out and about with me. And the person I'm going to dedicate this particular pickup to is none other than the wonderful Fresh over at A Couple of Nerds, because quite frankly, whenever I think classic and in immaculate condition, I think Fresh, and I'm sure he would agree with me. And of course, if you haven't discovered A Couple of Nerds yet, the link will be in the description with all the other channels that are being dedicated here, so you can go across to the channel and congratulate them on being YouTuber of the month this month. But that's Final Fantasy IV, the complete edition, in great condition, just like Fresh, coming into the collection where it will stay forevermore. So next up, we're moving away from the PSP and away from Sony, because we're moving back to Nintendo, but staying with a handheld, because I have been picking up some DS games, and one DS game that I've picked up this month is none other than Madden 07. Now you may be asking yourself, why would I be buying Madden 07 on the Nintendo DS? Well, the simple answer to that is it's a favour for a friend, and that particular friend just happens to be the channel that I'm going to dedicate this pickup to, and that is Lame Dad Retro Gamer. Now of course, if you've already discovered Dave over at Lame Dad Retro Gamer, you'll probably know why I picked up Madden 07, and if you haven't already discovered Lame Dad, then I recommend you get over there, subscribe and find out why. But nonetheless, Madden 07 for the Nintendo DS is in the collection now, and one of the rules that I have is if I get any games, they stay in the collection whether I like them or not, but kind of why I'm trying to focus on games that I want in the collection at the moment. But it's here, it's in the collection, and if you want to find out why,
welcome to the Poor
just
Man's
pop
Retro
over to
Game
Lame
Room,
Dad Retro
and
Gamer,
welcome to this
link
edition of
in the
Scanline,
description.
and this one's going to be a
Now,
little
next up, we're
different.
staying
I'm
with
going
the
to
Nintendo
actually
DS,
record.
and it's a game that I was going
It's
to
going to be
buy
a
for
recording
myself
of a
anyway,
CRT,
but I
but
noticed
it's
that
going to be my
someone's
PC
trade pile, and when I
monitor,
pointed it out,
my
they decided
CRT
just to
PC
send it as a
monitor connected
gift.
to
The
my
person
Windows
who
98
gifted me this game was
retro
UK, and
PC.
you'll know, Stu,
So
that
today
Iron
we're going
Man
to play a little
probably,
Doom
if you're
2,
watching this anyway, and if you don't,
you
definitely
know,
go and check him
you
out.
watch
But he
this channel,
gifted
you
me
know
this
how much
game,
I
and
love
it's
Doom.
not him that I'm going
And,
to dedicate this
really
pick
been
up
getting
to,
back
because
into,
you'll
retro
see later
PC
on anyway.
gaming.
But the game that
So,
he decided to send
when
to
I
me, and
started
I'm so
building
grateful
my
for it,
retro
is
PC,
SimCity DS. Now again, you're probably asking yourself why I would want SimCity on the DS, and the simple answer is this: I had no idea that there was so many ports from early PC games onto the DS, and as soon as I discovered this, I had to get as many as I could get my hands on. It was as simple as that. Back in the early to mid 90s, most of the video games that I played were played on PC, and I have a lot of fond memories, a lot of nostalgic memories for PC gaming from 1990 through to 1995. And as I said, on discovering that the DS DS had a few ports of PC games from that era. I not only wanted the games into the collection, I want to play them, experience them, and compare the PC originals to the DS ports. So that's a video that you might be interested in that will be coming up as soon as I get round to it. But the person I'm going to dedicate this pickup to is the poor man's game room, because very much like me, the PC was his home back in the early to mid 90s, and also very much like me, he still plays games from that era on that system. So go check out the poor man's retro game room, catch up in some early PC gaming, and of course the other systems that he covers as well, because he is a big fan of the Atari Jaguar. I don't know why, but you'd have to ask him yourself. But regardless of that, SimCity for the DS has come into the collection. I'm ecstatic to have it. I've already given it a little go just to see how it plays, and I'm looking forward to doing a full video on PC ports to the DS. So that's SimCity DS into the collection, where it will most definitely stay forever. Now next up, we're staying with the DS. It's the last of the DS games that I picked up, and this is an important game. It's a bit of a big hitter, I suppose. It's a game that I have never played before, a game that many of you out there will be screaming at your screens asking why I haven't played this game before, because that game is Chrono Trigger. Now the best reason for me not having played Chrono Trigger already is down to the fact that it didn't get a PAL release back in the day. Over here we had to wait until the DS got a port. We didn't even get a PlayStation port. I believe there was a port of Chrono Trigger on the PlayStation, and most certainly didn't get the original Super Nintendo release. But it's a game that every RPG fan over the pond absolutely bangs on about, and they consider this to be the best JRPG of all time. Now for me that's still an ongoing battle between Final Fantasy 7 and Suikoden 2, but it is about time that I got on the Chrono Trigger train. So that's Chrono Trigger for the DS into the collection, and most certainly will be getting played, and probably getting played a lot, just to see if it's as good as all you over there in North America say it is. Next up, we're moving away from the Nintendo DS, we're going back onto home consoles rather than handhelds, and we're going away from Sony as well, because this is going to be a Green Spine game. That's right, you heard me right. I have picked up an Xbox game, an Xbox original game that is, and it's because it was only ever on Xbox. It's Voodoo Vince. Now of course I can't talk too much about Voodoo Vince, because one, I never played it back in the day, and two, I still haven't played it today. It was of course my better half who is absolutely fascinated with Voodoo, and well, who am I to deny my better half from picking up a video game that she would like to see in the collection. Again, I can't talk to you at all about this game because I haven't played it, but if you know this game and want to drop down into the comments and let me know how you felt about it, well, that's exactly what the comments are there for. I will of course be dedicating this pickup to the wonderful Roger Retro Gamer, link again down in the description, because quite simply, if there's one person in the YouTube gaming community that has tried to force me down the Green Spine route, it's Roger Retro Gamer. So that's Voodoo Vince into the collection, and probably the better half will play it before me. Now that was the only Xbox game that I picked up this month, so we're moving back onto my home turf of Sony and the PlayStation 2, and you're probably worried I'm going to pull out 50 Shovelware titles for the PS2, but I'm not. I only picked up one game for the PS2, and that game is Genji. Now, much like Voodoo Vince, Genji is a game that I didn't play back in the day, but it's a PlayStation 2 game that I didn't play back in the day, and on top of that, it was getting late in the month and I had noticed that I hadn't picked up a single PS2 game. So to make amends and not make this video a complete disaster, Genji came home with me. It's a game I haven't played, as I said, so I don't know what it's like. As far as I'm aware, it didn't get very good reviews, but you know what, every now and again I do like to sit down with a bad game and see why it's so bad. And who will I dedicate this particular pickup to? Well, none other than Mark over at Geordie Slasher Gaming, because like me, he's a fully paid up member of Club Sony Pony, and when he comes across Sony PlayStation games, he's got to pick them up too, regardless whether he wants them, has played them, has nostalgia for them, he just needs them, just like me. But this is Genji, coming into the collection where it's going to stay forever. Now, as I said, that was the only PlayStation 2 game that I picked up this month, so let's move down a generation onto the original PlayStation, and I have picked up a couple of games for that system. The first one being The Adventures of Monkey Hero. Now you may be asking yourself, why did I buy The Adventures of Monkey Hero? And the answer to that is quite simple. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, over here in Scotland, we were introduced to a fair bit of Japanese and Chinese mythology and culture. And how did we get such an injection of culture over here in Scotland, you might be asking again? That was quite simply through television, film and literature. Now of course I don't know if you in particular are aware of the Monkey King, but over here in Scotland, books and TV shows such as The Water Margin and The Journey to the West were hugely popular, and the Monkey King was probably my favourite of them all. So anytime I come across a game with the Monkey King in it, I've just got to buy it. But who would I dedicate this particular pickup to? And that's quite a simple answer, because it's going to be Do You Nerd. And now you're probably asking yourself, does Do You Nerd really love the Monkey King, Journey to the West, or even The Water Margin? Well, to be frankly honest, that's a question they would have to answer themselves, because I don't know. What I do know, however, is they have an absolute undeniable love for The Legend of Zelda. And from what I can tell, The Adventures of Monkey Hero is basically a Zelda clone on the PlayStation. So there's another reason to pick that up, I suppose. So The Adventures of Monkey Hero, definitely into the collection where it's going to stay forever, not only because it's Monkey, but also because it might be a Zelda clone. Next up's another PlayStation game. It's a game that I didn't have back in the day, but it's part of a subset that I'm collecting for now, and that subset is the first 10 releases, or the first 10 PAL releases for the PlayStation, and I did get my hands on Jumpin' Flash. Now, like a few of the other games, this is not a game that I've played before. I don't really know too much about it, other than it's a very early 3D first person game, so that's slightly intriguing to me anyway. But it's also a game that maybe give me motion sickness, so I'm looking forward to finding that out too. But as I said, it had to come into the collection because it is one of the first 10 games that was released in PAL regions, and as much as I don't collect full sets, I do like to collect for subsets. It gives you something to aim for. And the person, of course, that I'm going to be dedicating this pickup to is none other than Stu, the Iron Man, Tootie UK, because it was good old Tootie UK that introduced me to the notion that these numbers down at the bottom of the spine represent the order they were released in, and that was exactly the type of nonsense that will hook me in and make me collect for it. Now, there are a couple of games on the first 10 list that are still to get. There is one out there that's going to be a real pain to get my hands on, but part of the fun of video game collecting is the hunt, it's the chase, it's the thrill of going out there and maybe finding what you're after. But Jumpin' Flash, one of the first 10 games in the PAL region, into the collection where it belongs, and it'll sit up there with its friends forever. Now, next up, and staying with the PlayStation, is another game that I didn't play back in the day, and I'm quite surprised I didn't play this one back in the day. If I did, I have no memories of it, but I'm getting on now, so maybe that memory's just slipped past me. But it's a game from a series that I love, and you'll probably love this series yourself too, because it's very popular, and that is Blood Omen, Legacy of Kane. Now, I have no idea why I managed to miss Blood Omen Legacy of Kane back in the day, because it seems exactly my kind of game. And then when you put that hand in hand with the fact that I loved Soul Reaver going forward, I have no idea why I didn't look back. I just probably wasn't in that mindset at that time. It is, however, creeping up in price a little bit, so I thought now was the time to finally go out there, hunt it down properly and bring it home into the collection. And it's definitely a game I'm really looking forward to sitting down and putting some proper time into it. Now, I haven't even tested the disc yet, because I want to sit down and play it all through. I know the disc's probably going to be fine, it looks great. Haven't played it because when I sit down I want the time to sit and just devote every minute I've got to this particular game, because it's a game that I should have played back in the day. The person I'm going to dedicate this pickup to is Curbana, and quite simply because he's got one of the best PlayStation collections that I've ever seen on YouTube. Although between you and me, he probably spends way more money than he should. But if you haven't checked out Curbana, the link will be in the description, and you will be able to see his PlayStation collection, along with all the other systems he collects for too, but it's his PlayStation 1 that really warms the cockles of my heart. But that is Blood Omen, Legacy of Kane, finally coming into the collection, and I will finally get round to playing this apparent masterpiece, and it's going to be there for a long time, so I've got plenty of time to do it. Now, that was the last of the PlayStation pickups, and we're going to be moving down a generation to the 16-bit era. And the first pickup, well, I'm going to dedicate this one obviously straight away to the wonderful, fabulous Super Jimtendo, because what I've picked up here came in this box here. this wonderful Super Game Boy set box. Now what came in it was not the Super Nintendo itself. I already have a Super Nintendo, so I don't need another one, but it did come with the Super Game Boy and a copy of FIFA inside. Now when Tutti UK gets round to watching this particular pickup, he's going to be pointing and laughing at me, and why you may ask, it's simply because I've picked up a lot of Nintendo cardboard and I do tend to mock him for doing the very same thing. But when I had the opportunity of picking up this box, including the box Super Game Boy inside, and not only that, the copy of FIFA inside, there was no way I was going to pass this by, and especially not for the paltry sum of £15 for the whole lot. Now, as a few of you might know, I do have the Game Boy player for the GameCube, so I don't need this option to play Game Boy games, but it's a nice option to have, and it's a couple of nice boxed examples as well, so very happy to get this into the collection, and I will be using it to play Game Boy games as well as using my Game Boy player on the GameCube. Now that was the only Super Nintendo that I picked up this month, so we're moving away from Nintendo. We're also dropping down a generation because we're going 8-bit, and we're going 8-bit because I've started collecting for the Master System, not heavily but enough, and the Master System game that I picked up is the Prince of Persia. Now the Prince of Persia was definitely one of the games on the Master System list that I was most definitely going to pick up, and that again goes back to my love of early PC games, and I do love to see games that were a nice crossover from the PC space and onto the console space. Prince of Persia also has a bit more meaning because of its links with Assassin's Creed, and anyone that knows me knows that I do like my Assassin's Creed franchise. I haven't had the chance to sit down and play the Master System version of Prince of Persia yet, but I'm sure I'm going to absolutely love it. And I'm going to dedicate this pickup to not one but two channels out there. The first one being the fantastic 8-Bit Boy UK, and the second one Retro Rewind. So if you want to check out both Ollie and Clint respectively, why don't you pop down to their channels as well? The link will be in the description, and maybe you will understand why I was drawn to collecting for the Master System after watching those two wonderful chaps. So that's the Prince of Persia for the Master System coming into the collection, where it will be played, loved and lived forever. So there you go my friends, that was all my pickups for the last month, the month of July 2023. And what did you think of them? I want you to drop down into the comments, of course. Let me know if any of these games are games that you played back in the day. Are the games that you still play now? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Drop that all down in there, because as I say every week, the interaction between you and me, well, that's what makes YouTube special. It does for me anyway. And as you can see from the dedications that I've made today, yes, I do. I reach out and I like to talk to you guys about whatever it is that I'm talking about and whatever it is you want to talk about too. Thank you very much for watching as always, and I do hope that I managed to stick to my guns and mostly buy important games. May not be really big hitters, there's a couple of bigger hitters in that list there, and I hate the term Holy Grail, but certainly a few must-have games for my personal collection. So again, thank you very much for watching as always, and until next time, cheerio.